Orks are amazing right now. I just had a really great result at a big major. I missed out on the golden ticket by the skin of my teeth. It was so close. I had it within my grasp, but now I'm going to have to go earn my ticket to the World Championships at another tournament later on. So this was a really big event, and I had so many really important lessons that I learned, and that actually some of my clients learned, because this is really what was really fun is that I had several clients who were actually attending this tournament as well. So I got to see performance in real life, and we got to actually strategize and correct things, basically in real time. Obviously I couldn't talk to them during their games, but before and after their games there was I was able to help do reviews and stuff. So that was very, very cool. You guys are going to learn a ton from this video. I'm going to give you away a lot of my takeaways from my matchups that I had. I'm going to teach you my list. I'm going to teach you how I may or may not change my list based off of lessons that I learned. I'm going to teach you some really, really important play lessons that my opponents had multiple opportunities where they could have beaten me, taken me out of the tournament earlier, but they didn't because they missed a crucial decision. And then I'll talk to you about why I lost my last round and didn't win the tournament, and instead ended up in third place. And it was because of a set of wild circumstances and a bad decision on my part, because people love to blame dice for the games, but the reality is dice very, 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 very rarely determine the outcome of game, and it's almost always your decisions which enable the dice. So stay tuned, because this is going to be a wild little ride. Let's get started with what my list was. If you're an Orc fan, you're going to freaking love this. All right, this is no Gaz, no problems. Now, the reality is I love Gazcool, and I'll talk about him later in the video, why he may or may not end up in the list. But for right now, people who say that you need Gaz to run a Warhorde list are wrong. So let me explain why I'm running Warhorde in particular. I run Warhorde because Warhorde has some of the best suites of stratagems in the entire game, and their base detachment rule is just brilliant. So sustained hits just turbocharges Orcs in general, and the stratagems are unparalleled in the Orc repertoire. So I run one War Boss, one Beast Boss, one Mech. And that is one of the things that is actually on the chopping block for me. So one War Boss, one Beast Boss, one Mech. I have the War Boss is going to be running with the 5 knobs, and the Beast Boss is going to be running with the Beast Snagus. Seems pretty darn logical. I actually run 2 units of boys. Now this is something I get a lot of feedback on, and people just don't quite grasp it. In my brain, I personally believe that boys are right about the single best battle line unit in the game. They are incredible valuable for 80 points. You have 10 models with toughness 5. The knob has 2 wounds. They have sticky objectives. They actually hit quite hard in melee, especially on the wall turn. They are relatively tough. Most other battle line units in the army in the game have basically no chance in picking up a unit of boys, simply because T5, and I have access to a strat called that makes me -1 to be wounded. So most other battle line things in the game, or basically anything that costs 80 points or less, is going to be wounding my boys on 6s if I need them to, which means my boys are pretty much always going to come out on top in those traits. I can also fight them on death to defeat fight first things, which we'll talk about later. But I love having these units of boys. I have 1 unit of commandos, and they were the star of the show. Now, I personally hate spending 120 points for commandos. I hate doing it, but the reality is if I don't do it, there are just games you're going to auto lose. I personally believe if you don't have infiltrators in this current meta, you are a psychopath. Unless your army just doesn't have access to infiltrators, in which case, okay, fair play. But if you have the option to take infiltrators and you don't, you're a psychopath. Then I have 1 unit of Storm Boys. I used to run 3 of these guys, but I have whittled it down to only really needing 1, and I don't really need that one, but I definitely like having that 1 unit of Storm Boys. In almost every game, that 1 unit of Storm Boys is going to start in reserve. However, there is an exception, and that is generally when I'm playing Eldar, they will start on the table, because I like having access to that advanced and charge unit that could just go dig a fast-moving Eldar unit that's a little too aggressively deployed turn 1. I take 2 units of Gretchen. I would like 3, but I take 2. I have 2 5-mans of flash kits, 2 breaker boys, 3 tank buses, and then 5 trucks. Now, just a kind of quick synopsis of how these things go. I always start 1 unit of Gretchen in a truck, and I always make sure that truck is 9 inches away, or 8.9 inches away from the central objective. So what I do is those Gretchen, when I go first, they just disembark from the truck. They're able to go into the center and get me Arid Denial, get me Cleanse, get me Extend, get me Secure, get me Locust if I really want it. They get me a variety of secondaries, and I do not care that my opponent is going to kill my Gretchen in the follow-up turn. Then I will hop my boys squad, which started on my home field objective. So my home field objective is now sticky. My boys will then jump in the truck, and now my truck can move, and I can get it into very aggressive positions with boys staged appropriately. I like to use those boys as early game melee trading value and early game pressure on my opponents. Then I have 4 other trucks. One of the trucks is going to have the Beast Boss with Snaggers in it. And then the last 3 trucks is going to be a combination of Breakers, Tank Busters, and Flash Kits and Knobs. Now, I pretty much always will end up with at least 1 unit of either Tank Busters or Breakers in reserves. If I start Breakers in reserves, the reason for that is because I can use Here We Go on them. You know, you can't use Here We Go on a unit inside a transport because that stratagem must be used at the start of your movement phase, which would be before you disembark from a transport. But you can use that on units that are in reserves. If you didn't know this, well, it's true. Look it up. So what you can do, since Breaker Boys actually have natively inbuilt rerolls, you can spend Here We Go on them and have a 7-inch strat reserve charge. More functionally a 7-inch, 7 on the dice strat reserve charge, which is very, very powerful, and it gives you a lot of utility. I also very often like to rapid ingress those Breaker Boys, things like that. So that is how I structure it, okay? So let's just get on to this first freaking round, because there were some crazy, crazy things that happened in this first round. Round 1, it was a win to the Orks. It was 100-76. I was playing against a really lovely guy named Daniel. And Daniel is, I played him before at a tournament. It was about a year ago. Let me just say, this guy has gotten so much better at the game. It's actually really inspiring to see just how much better he's gotten at the game in the year since I've last played him. So, like, kudos to him. He brought what he described as a meme list, but this was not a meme. So people who have never played against the Crew Hunting Pack, what you got to understand is all these Crew are now going to have a 5-up invulnerable save against shooting. And all the Crew, the non-mounted Crew at least, just natively have stealth. So suddenly these 20-man blobs of Crew are all 5-up invuln and -1 to be hit. That skews the math of armies that are trying to kill hordes dramatically. It creates major differences in what you would actually expect to see happen to these units. So that is a very, very big deal. Now, one of the big things that I just wasn't calculating on when it came to this Crew detachment is these Farstalker units. I think it's 11 or 12 models, because there's like 10 guys and you get like 1 or 2 Crew hounds with them. And then he actually put a character with the Farstalkers. So he got the first deployment. And when he did that, since he had like 13 models in the objective, I believe it was 13 models in the unit, he was literally able to screen the entire deployment zone on Crucible of Battle. That was very, very painful for me, because that meant my commandos really couldn't go anywhere that was useful for me, because he was able to deploy first. Now, he made a very critical error. He actually used one of his abilities to redeploy that unit of Farstalkers into another area of the board, because he was afraid that if I went first, I would get to kill that unit, I would get a free overwhelming force, perhaps a free storm hostile objective, yada, yada, yada. However, he went first. Had he left that unit there, he could have just advanced it 1.1 inches away from my entire army, which would have meant that I could not leave my deployment zone in turn 1. Now, in addition to this, since he's got scout moves on everything else, and we kind of discussed this, he could have followed that up with a second and a third wave where he functionally could have kept me from leaving my deployment zone until turn 3 with relative ease, which would have meant that he had auto won the game. Now, I am lucky that he didn't see that and he decided to redeploy them rather than risk me going first. If I were him, and I gave him this advice, I would accept the fact that if he went second, he loses the Farstalkers. But if he goes first, he basically auto wins the game. So we spoke about it, and I think he got the hang of things. He actually ended up doing pretty well in the tournament, so I'm proud of him. So this army has a lot behind it. I think there's a few small changes you could make to it to make it a little bit more dangerous. Like, for example, maybe drop some of the riders, give him 1 or 2 hammerheads. And I think that would really change the power of the army. But overall, the army is much better than what most people might think. So give it a whirl. Lots of scout moves, lots of infiltrate. The army has real play. Second round, I was going against the Tyranids of the Synaptic Nexus. Now, I want to say something real quick. My road at this tournament was not easy. I played 4 WTC players at this tournament. That is 4 of the top 10 players in the country. 2 of them were top 5 players in the country. So this was a very hard tournament for me, and I cannot tell you just how impressive this Ork army is and how running it goes. Maybe I'll do a separate video on exactly how to run the army, but I told you how I deployed it and stuff. Anyway, let's get into round 2. So this was a 100-point win to me, 53 to the Tyranids player. Now, we were playing this on Linchpin and Search and Destroy, so it was relatively close deployment zones, which was generally a good thing for my style of pressure melee army. He had the Hive Tyrant with a -1 damage enhancement. He had the Neurothrope with a +1 strength and AP enhancement. Very strong unit. We are 2x10 Hormigons, 1 Biovore, which is just like obvious. You're going to include a Biovore in every single Nid's army. 2 Excrin, 2 Neurolictor, 2 Norn Emissaries, 1 3-man unit of Raveners, 1 Ripper Swarm, and 1 Tyrannofex with a Rupture Cannon, and the 6-man of Zone Threats. Now, this was Mr. Bernard, who was also a very lovely guy. I had a blast playing him. Big shout out to him. And this is one of the players that, the way I like to describe people like Bernard is that he's a good player who's not used to having his mistakes exploited. So just a few incorrect decisions allows me to get a disproportionate win. Whereas had there were just like a few minor things had he not chosen, then I would have been a much closer game. So he's a very good player, and we actually got to speak after the game, which I think was a very, very useful for him, so that he would maybe understand had he not made these 1 or 2 choices, it would have been a much, much closer game. This is something that I see a lot of people fall into, where you are good players, you've got good fundamentals, you understand your army, you actually understand opponents' armies, but sometimes you're just you don't quite measure the rapid ingress, or you touch the terrain for no reason when you shouldn't have touched the terrain. And these little things can be exploited. So if you're one of these people you're like the best of your friends group, but for some reason you struggle to go over break even at tournaments, that's probably why. It's probably because you do have a fundamentally good grasp of the game. You're just making these little mistakes that you don't need to make. And if you're struggling with that, check out my checklist video that I made. It's going to help you a ton. All right. Let's get into round 3. So round 3, this is against the captain of our WTC player. Fantastic player. I had a blast playing with him. And one of the hilarious things that happened in this game, so it was a 91 victory to me, 43 to the Inari. One of the very, very funny things that happened in this game, which is something that happened multiple times actually, was there was a 3rd time over the course of this game where a 3rd unit jumped out of a truck. And at one point, Geyer, which is his name, great guy, he looked at me, he said, but how are there more... And he did that for 3 minutes. There's so many units in this Ork army. It is such a disaster problem for your opponent to deal with. It's actually tailor designed to deal with Inari armies. Seeing as Inari, in my opinion, is definitely the strongest army in the game right now. So I designed it to play against Inari and be really good into everything else. So what Geyer had, he had Ivrain and the Vizark, and they were running with a 10 Incubi. That is the big fight's first brick. He had 2 Autarks. They were both with Howling Banshees. 2 5-mans of Dark Reavers, 1 10-man of Dark Reavers, 2 5-mans of Fire Dragons, 3 5-mans of Rangers. And I actually agree. I think Rangers are really good. They're super cheap infiltrator units that have inbuilt reactive moves. Very solid. 3 Warp Spiders, 6 Wind Riders. And Wind Riders are disgusting into Orks. They just tear through the army. And then he had 1 Wave Serpent. So very strong list. The problem with this matchup was that he just was not prepared for how many units I can stage with my trucks. So I more or less had a turn where I just gave him all of my trucks. I said, here are 5 trucks, kill them. And he was able to kill 2 of them. But outside of the 2 trucks that he killed, poured 4 full units. And then there were 3 other trucks that weren't killed that also had an additional 6 or 5 units inside of them. And it was just too much pressure for him to be able to handle. So this is one of the things about Inari, guys. A lot of people fear killing the Inari, especially in the shooting phase. They don't want to kill an Inari unit in the shooting phase because then they'll get to do the lethal intent, which is the free move at the end of their shooting phase. The problem is, guys, if you don't kill Inari in their shooting phase, then you didn't kill Inari. Which the elf player is going to be like, great, I didn't lose any models. Awesome. And if you do kill units, then they get to do a free move, which you're scared of. So in my humble opinion, and this might be, this works for my playstyle. It might not work for yours, but just here's my thought process. It's better for me to kill my opponent than to not kill my opponent. So I just say screw it, and I just murder my opponent, and it works out pretty dang well. Now, of course, there are decisions that need to be made in there. There are considerations. There are niche scenarios where you don't want to kill a unit in shooting. But for the most part, if you just pressure them, that is their weakness. They do not like pressure, and Orks are the kings of pressure. All right, so let's go into round 4. This was another WTC player, and this guy's actually already got his golden ticket. He was at an event previous in the year where I was actually out of country because I was judging a tournament in Sweden, which had a blast doing that. But I'm jealous that I wasn't able to get to this tournament and try to win my ticket, so it is okay. But shout out to Thomas. So we had a great game. I've played him once before, and it was that was a closer game. This one, the scores really ran up in rounds 4 and 5. It looked much closer until like the very end. So I did win 100-38. It was my Orks versus Warrior Bioform. And let me just say, I am so excited to see Thomas do really well. I believe he went, was he 4-2 or was he 5-1? I could find out pretty quick. Anyway, he went really well with his Warrior Bioform army. Warrior Bioform has many better play styles than what most people would like to think. So in Warrior Bioform, all your warriors get a 5 invulnerable save. They get +1 OC, and you can actually spend CP to regenerate models in your warrior squads. This is very powerful. It lets them just say they're behind a wall and they're missing a model. Now they can just regenerate an OC3 model through a wall in the command phase to score primary, or even to deny primary. I guess it's only to score. You can't use it to deny, but don't worry about that. But it's actually a very strong army. Now, there were a few things in his list that I probably would have changed, but he ended up doing quite well with it, and I was happy to see it. So he went, and this was on, I think this was on Scorched Earth and Tipping Point. So he went with Death Leaper, a Hive Tyrant. He had 2 Winged Primes. One had a -1 to be hit enhancement, and one had a +1 to hit enhancement. The +1 to hit went with the melee warriors, and the -1 to be hit went with the 6 shooty warriors. Then he had 3x3 ranged warriors, 1 Biovore, 3x1 Lictor, and I think Lictors are just insane, so I love that. 3x1 Exocrines, and 2x1 Tyrannofexes. Now, there was a situation in this game in round, I went first, and in round 1, I just set my commandos forth. I threw a Squig Bomb at Death Leaper, it hit him. I shot grenades at Death Leaper, it hit him. I charged Death Leaper, I murdered him. And then that allowed my commandos to basically just block one of the main movement lanes in the entire battlefield, which really messed Thomas up. That means he couldn't move half of his army across the board, and he had to move the other half of his army across the board, which allowed me to focus on one flank at a time. And that was really the key to victory here. So in review of the game, there was just maybe I actually think I deployed first, so I don't think he could have blocked that, but I think he should have accounted for just how problematic those commandos can be early game, especially considering that you cannot overwatch them, because he was ready, he was prepared to overwatch with his sustained hits warriors and actually just murder my commandos, but you cannot overwatch those commandos, which is actually quite a powerful rule on a lot of layouts. So I love my commandos. Now, we spoke about his army list a little bit. I think one of the big problems here was he did not have the Advance and Charge Warrior Blob. The Advance and Charge Warrior Blob in this detachment is brutal. It is expensive, though. But had he had that Advance and Charge Warrior Blob, I would not have been able to stage correctly, or stage the way I did stage, and it would have given him the ability to actually hit me first. So without that, that basically meant that I get to choose when we start the engagement, which is never a good thing when you're playing against Orks. We talked about a couple other things in his army, but overall, I think that's what he was missing out on this one. Warrior Bioform has a lot more behind it. I still don't think it's the best Tyranid detachment, but there is so much more play involved in it than what most people probably consider. One last aspect of this game, and if you're a Tyranid player, I think you need to hear this. Thomas forgot to drop a Spore Mine in one of his turns, and that could have changed a lot. I probably still had the win, but it would not have been this huge a differential, though. You need to have a checklist with you, whether it's in your head or if it's physically on the table. I've got several clients who are actually writing checklists down as they're playing the game, and it's helping them a bunch. So just a little tip for you guys. But if you had a checklist that says, hey, at the start of the movement phase, check firing lanes. What advances do you need to get the angles you want? deploy spore mine. Even if you know you should deploy spore mines, if you read it, you're much more likely to actually do it. Had he deployed a spore mine in a specific position, it would have stopped me from being able to get a good advance and charge on his warrior blob. So you guys really, really need to pay attention to these checklists that can help you not forget information. And it was a brain fart on Thomas's part. He knows it, but he's fixing it now. He's actually going to start bringing the checklist, and then he'll never make that mistake again, and he will continue crushing people like he crushed everyone else. So great job, Thomas. I love playing you, but that's how that went down. Then we went to round 5. Now this was a really, really a matchup I was pretty scared of, but it gave me a lot of confidence in my army list. So I was playing Victor Bergenholtz, and Victor was the very first person in 10th edition to actually win a GT with Grey Knights. So he is a Grey Knight specialist. And we were playing this on Purge the Foe, Crucible of Battle, which is not where I, with my 21 unit army, wanted to play against the Grey Knights. So I knew that he had an advantage in scoring primary in this game because he's always going to get kill more. So as the Orc player, what you can do is you can, or it doesn't have to be Orcs, as the MSU player or whatever, what you can do in this scenario is you can say, he's going to score more than me. So I could just continuously feed him units and let him score kill more every turn, or I can guarantee him to get kill more one turn by giving him my army. But since I have so much stuff, he can't kill enough stuff, and then he's out in the open and he's ready for me to come and smash him. Which is more or less what I did. We basically spent 2 turns just staging up on each other. And then in turn 3, I believe it was, we had a go turn. Where I forced him to actually go into me before I was in my WA. He killed a bunch of stuff. I WA'd. I basically tabled him. And, you know, he had already killed over half my army, but I had so many units, and the units that he had to kill were the ineffective units. It was my trucks. It was my flash kits. It was these things that I didn't really mind losing. So sure, he got a lot of points for it, but it set the rest of my army up for really just breaking through him in one fell swoop. Shout out to my one solo surviving Break-A-Boy with the tank hammer. This guy just went in and like got 9 dev wounds in one activation onto a Dread Knight and just basically wiped all hopes of overcoming things. When I play Victor, I love it, but I hate it. He's an extremely scary opponent. He's very, very good, but I kind of love playing him because he likes to banter just as much as I do. So even though it's a highly competitive game, it has a very casual feel to it. We're both drinking while we're playing. We're both cracking jokes. We're just checking each other's lines. Any argument or disagreement we have is very easily settled with either a TO coming by or us just like physically moving a base to see where a model can end. So I love playing him. It's always scary. It's never guaranteed who's going to win in that matchup. It was a blast. And then we went to the finals. Now here is the salt. This was the big lesson here, okay? I went and played against Sveinung. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm not going to try. Anyway, Sveinung is a great guy. Love him. Real big fan. A lot of you guys know him as Ponder on Discord. He is like the Tyranid math dude. And he is a very, very, very smart guy. Exceptionally skilled player. He is one of the people, along with Victor Schetzel, who's my moderator, and a couple other people. He's one of the few people who I find it acceptable for me to lose against in the country. I don't want to lose to him. I hate the fact that I lost to him, but it's an acceptable loss because this guy is a very, very good player. The tale of this tape was we were deployed on Dawn of War, and it was Linchpin. My army is very specifically tailored to crush Inari. This is the very first game I have played with my Orks that I lost against Inari. It's the only time it's happened. Now, outside of my very first practice match against them when I didn't know what Inari did. I lost the very first one. Since then, and with this specific list in particular, I have not lost a single match against Inari, and there's been a lot. He did some things that I never would have considered he would have done. So I learned some very, very valuable takeaways from this lesson. So Sveinung understood innately, because he's a very good player. He knew he had a huge disadvantage. I've got 12 squig bombs, which can just go mess up things. I've got so many units that are all hyper efficient into killing him, and then he's not that efficient into killing me. That he understood that he was basically playing the game from a losing perspective turn 1. I've never seen an Eldar player go full send turn 1. Sveinung essentially went full send, but he did it in such a way that he was able to kind of block me off with warp spiders. So he was going to have one really, really good Overwatch. He was going to, he was able to move in, kill 2 to 3 of my trucks in turn 1. He stuffed my infiltrators turn 1, which stopped the squig bomb and the grenades. And I just wasn't deployed in order to take advantage of his aggression in turn 1 because I never expected him to be that aggressive. Now, when he went this aggressive, he also needed the dice to be in his favor, and they absolutely were. But the dice were not why he won. Svinung needed to go full send. He needed the dice to work out in his favor, and then he needed me to make a critical mistake, which I made. So I learned a very, very, very valuable lesson. On my go turn, I had charged my knobs into his incarn. I was going to delete his incarn. I charged my breakaboys into one of his units of Howling Banshees. Now, everyone who's ever played against an incarn, you know it's super important that you kill the incarn first, because if you kill another unit in his army, he's just going to teleport the incarn to it. And I know this, and so I was very cautious. I didn't kill anything in shooting. I was like, all right, I'm going to charge the incarn, kill him, and then I'll wipe another 1,000 points of his army. There'll be no problem. Well, maybe 800 points of his army or whatever. But when I charged my breakaboys into the Howling Banshees, they had fight first, and I just fought on death because I'll kill them as well. I wasn't considering the fact that when I fought on death and I killed his unit, he was able to teleport the incarn off of my fight on death. It seems stupid, and in retrospect it is, but it's a scenario, it's a situation I've never been in before where my fight on death wasn't the correct decision. So, because what I've done is I've programmed my brain algorithmically to say, oh, fights first, I'll counter that with fight on death. But in this scenario, he fought first, I fought on death, I killed his unit, he teleported the incarn away. My knobs were unable to hit anything in my go turn. And then his incarn was alive to deny things, and that was enough to swing the game. So, Svinung, and a lot of people would be like, oh, dice screwed you, man. Not the incarn thing, but they screwed you because you lost too much stuff way too early, and Svinung made way too many saves. And he did make a lot of saves, and I did lose too much stuff early. But I didn't lose because of luck. I lost for a very specific reason. Svinung was smart enough to understand that he was in a bad position, so that he had to take big risk, and he had to hope for good dice, and he had to hope for me making a big mistake. So that is a reflection of his skill of recognizing the situation he was in, that he was able to take advantage of the correct decisions that brought the correct dice, and then he took advantage of my mistake of ordering of when I was doing, because I shouldn't have charged those Howling Banshees. I should have just accepted that my breakaboys were going to die next turn to his Banshees, and just continue to play the game. He took advantage of that mistake in concert with his correct decision to go very aggressive and his correct decision to hope for good dice. All of that together is why he ends up winning the game. And that is a decision he made. That is not a luck of the dice thing. That is he makes the correct play and it worked out. I couldn't be more proud of him. He played awesome. I played a really good game. I made one mistake, and that is enough in Warhammer. And Svinung was there, and he got the golden ticket. I couldn't be more proud of the guy. He crushed it. So now I'm going to have to go earn my ticket at another tournament. But guys, this just goes to show you that this is a decision-based game. Even when you get lucky with the dice, you can only get lucky if you put yourself in the position to get lucky. You can only get unlucky if you put yourself in the position to get unlucky. This is how Warhammer is. So anyway, let's finish up the video. I'm going to go to what the changes I'm considering with the list are. I went 5-1. I'm very, very happy going 5-1. The way I look at it, and I coach all my clients and everything this, you can never expect to go win a tournament, because winning a tournament requires a little bit of luck. There's going to need to be some pairing luck. There's going to need to be some dice luck somewhere. There's just too many random variables to expect to win a tournament and be rational about it. The best any player could really expect to be is an X-1 player, meaning if it's a 5-round tournament, you expect to go 4-1. If it's a 6-round, you expect to go 5-1. I expect X-1 from myself. I'm a very good player. I'm pretty accomplished. This is what I expect from myself. Some people should expect X-2 for themselves. And you should never expect X-0 of yourself. If you do that, you're just setting yourself up for failure. All right. If you're a newer player, expect X-3. Get excited if you go X-2. That's great. Set the correct goals. But now let's shift mindsets. I want to talk about the changes that I could potentially make for my list. Number one, I'm not going to change anything. The list is freaking awesome. It operated 100% as it should. My opponent in my last round, he made correct decisions, got good dice. I made a bad decision. He won the game. That is not the list fault. That is what happens in Warhammer sometimes. I got a little bit outplayed. The list doesn't need to change. The list was a monster. There was nothing that I couldn't do. I had units for days. I could kill anything on the game on the board. I had units that I could freely sacrifice to get my secondaries, to get my primaries. It was a beautifully functioning list, masterful. Now, when Inari specifically is nerfed, I will look at adding Gaz in. So the reason I don't bring Gaz Kolthraka right now is because he is a liability into Eldar. And as Inari is as strong as they are, and they don't need to be nerfed a lot, mind you, just a very small one. I think Lethal Intent, which is their free move at the end of the shooting phase, I think if they cap that at like 7 inches instead of being however far you want to move, I think that's probably enough to fix the army, mind you. Maybe Howling Banshees should go to 100 points instead of 90, but besides that, I don't really think they need any other nerf. So I hope GW doesn't slam them into oblivion. They just need a light touch. And once that nerf occurs, I think I'll be looking at bringing Gazkul back in. But for right now, just having more units is so gratifying. And honestly, I didn't need Gaz anywhere. He would have been nice in certain scenarios. Like he would be nice into Tyranids. He would be nice into Knights and Chaos Knights. And even though I didn't play Knights or Chaos Knights in this tournament, I played them enough. I don't need them. So that's why I don't have Gaz in. I will consider it when Inari go down. When Inari get knocked down a little bit. Perhaps I could run 2 units of Tank Busters instead of 3. But honestly, guys, Tank Busters are so useful. They're so multi-tooled. Because a unit of Tank Busters, they can charge into Guardsmen or Elves and just slaughter them because they go up to Strength 6 during the WoD. They crush. They have so much utility. I love the Squig Bombs. I love the rockets. I love it all. An extra Beast Boss with Snagas seems very intriguing. I honestly would love an extra 5-minute unit of Flash Kits. The Flash Kits just always pull their weight. And then the last part of the discussion that I'm debating with the list is, do I keep the mech or do I bring the extra Gretchen? The reason why I have the mech is that 1, lone ops are just useful. 2, being able to give +1 to hit with a truck that has 2 units of Tank Busters in it is brutal. That is a truck that's hitting on 4s with 10d3 blast shots. You can just delete blobs with that. It is brutal. It's also fairly reasonably hard to position to take advantage of. There's really no scenario I was able to take advantage of it in this tournament. A little bit against the Kroot, but they were stealth, so then it was still hitting on 5s. So it's like, yeah, you know what? I think I would have beat the Kroot even without that. I can see that there are matchups, though, where that mech with the +1 hit on the truck full of, 10d3 rockets that all have blast can really be game-changing. For example, against AC/DC, that can just be 100% game-changing. Against World Eaters that might have a 10-man unit of Berserkers or even a 20-man of Berserkers now, that can be game-changing. So for the utility stakes, I might keep them, but the extra Gretchen is also just so valuable. That's an extra 21 OC that you can just on-demand drop somewhere. So that's the only real consideration I'm making for right now. Otherwise, the list is going to say, guys, this was my tournament review. I missed the golden ticket by the skin of my teeth, but it's okay because I could taste it. So I'll have to go earn it at another tournament so that I can make it to the World Championships. Appreciate all of your attention. I hope you took away some really valuable things from this video. And with that, I'm going to take off. So crumb on. Bye-bye.